Hello everybody, this is Professor West. Welcome back to C# programming. Last week we discussed loops. As you learned, there's very little to a loop other than creating the loop itself, telling it where to start the loop, and then telling it where to end the loop, and incrementing the loop. Other than that, the code is the same that you've been dealing with. This week we're going to talk about functions. Let me start off by deleting a lot of this stuff from last week, so we'll have a whole blank space to work with. Now, up until now, we haven't really done a lot. We haven't really talked about functions, and there's a reason for that. We've been doing everything inside the main function. I told you from the beginning we would do everything for the first 5 or 6 weeks, or first 5 or 6 segments in the main function. Now we're going to move into creating new functions. So, let me make a little bit of space here. Let me start by telling you what a function is. A function is nothing more than a chunk of code. Let that sink in for just a second. It's all this code that we've written so far, it's just been a chunk of code. It's been in the main function. When the program runs, the computer automatically goes to the main function and starts running it, and that's why it runs the code in the main function. What we're going to do is create a new function, and then anytime we want in the program, we can call that function, which will run that function, and then return back to where it was at. So, think of a function. I like to use an automobile example. If you think of your car, you have an engine, you have tires, you have a steering wheel, you have seats. Each one has its own thing that it does. You have a transmission. Each one has its own specific task that it does. You know, you turn the wheel to the left or the right to turn your car. You hit the brakes to stop the car. That's exactly what we're talking about here. We're going to create little functions that each one has their own specific task. And then throughout the program, whenever we need them to run, we simply call them. Just like tapping on the brakes would invoke the brakes on your car. Calling the function would invoke the function. It's actually very simple. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to say public int. No, let's start with a void. Public void do something. And then we need our braces. Now notice I came down here to the end of the main function, but I'm still inside the class. This one closes the class. No function can exist inside of another function, but they all have to be in the class. So right now, if you look at it from a class standpoint, this function and this function are equal. I could create as many functions as I want. There's no limit, and I can have them do whatever I want. Now here's a couple of tips. Typically, you want a function to do a specific task. So imagine you go to Walmart and you've gotten all your groceries and now you're checking out. So the lady at the register scans an item. What happens is a function is called that goes to the database that looks up that item and comes back and says, oh, that's butter, it's $3.95. And then another function is called that's going to add that to the subtotal. Then she scans the next item. The first function's called, goes and looks it up and says, oh, that's Dr. Pepper, it's 99 cents. And then another function adds that to the subtotal. And it keeps going like this. Each one does something very specific, which allows us to give it a specific name. In this case, I'm just using do something as an example, and then I'm going to have a right line statement that says, hey, I'm doing something. So, this function is now going to sit here and wait for me to somewhere in this program call it or reference it. And to do so, all I have to do is invoke the name. Now, notice it's trying to give me an error. Why would it do that? Let's check it out and find out. There was a build error. According to this, oh, it's because we didn't add the word static when you create them. Static, okay. That's fine because I wanted to walk you through what these commands here meant anyway. Public tells the computer that this function is going to be able to be accessed from anywhere in the program. So anywhere in this program we'll be able to call this function. Static tells it that it's part of the class. Void tells it that it will not be returning a value. It'll do something, and then that's it. It'll end. So in this case, I had it output a statement. I could have it do several things. I could have it do a bunch of stuff, but the point is it's not going to return a value, which don't worry about that for now. We'll do that in a minute, and you'll see. Now when I run this program, it called the other function, it ran the lines of code that's in that function, and then it ended. So all it's doing, it's still starting with the main when it runs. The first thing it did was it called this function and told it, hey, do something. This function came down, or this call came down and ran this function, which in turn ran these lines of code, which were simple output statements. When it was finished, it returned to the very next line, and then it ended with the output, press any key to exit and end. So I could, let's say int number equals 0. If, let's see, let's do a console write line. Would you like to do something? 1 equals yes, 2 equals no. We'll just keep it simple. If, oh, I need my read line statement, don't I? So number equals int parse, hold on. So let's see, convert to int32 read line, that should be all good. Now if number equals 1, do something. Okay, don't forget you have to have 2 equal signs. So if number equals 1, then do something. So when I run this program now, it's going to ask me would I like to do something. If I enter a 1, then it's going to call that function, run those lines, and then exit. If I do not, if I enter anything other than 1, then it just skips that. It simply doesn't care that there's anything in here. That's all there is to functions, guys. Well, that's the main part. Now we're going to get into returning values from them. Sometimes you want them to do something and give you a value back. So let's get rid of this function called do something, and let's create one called public int add numbers. Int num1, comma, int num2. My braces. Okay. And now, what I'm telling it here is, I'm creating a new function called add numbers. And I have here what we call parameters. I created 2 variables. One is called an integer called num1. The second is an integer called num2. When I call this program, I'm going to send 2 numbers to this program. So maybe 5 and 8. And the first number is going to be assigned to this. the second number is going to be assigned to this. Make sure you understand that they are always kept in the proper order. So I'll get to that in just a second. Total equals num1 plus num2. And then return total. So what this is going to do is, whatever values I sent, let's say I sent 2 and 3, now it's going to create a variable called total. It's going to add them together, 2 plus 3, which would be 5, and then it's going to return that value. So when I call this function, I have to first give it a variable to assign to. So I'm going to create one right now for the heck of it. I'm going to call it temp, and I'm going to set it equal to 0. And I'm only doing that because I don't want to have to think of another variable name. So I would say, instead of, just a second ago I just had do something here. Now I'm going to say temp equals add numbers. And what values am I sending? Well, for now I'm just going to send 4 and 3. Why not? So, and did I forget static again? That's very easy to do because in other languages I don't have to add the word static. So since I program in about 18 different programming languages, sometimes I get them a little confused. That's okay. Let's run this program and see what happens. Would you like to do something? Yes. What happened? We don't know what happened. What happened was it called this line, which told it temp equals, and then temp, it just kind of sits there. This part actually calls the function. It sent the variables 4 and 3. It added them together, which is 7. It returned the value. It said, okay, temp is now 7, but I forgot to put a write line statement to output it. That's so easy to do, and it happens so often. And people sit there and say, why isn't my program working? Well, it's doing what you told it to. You just forgot to add something. Okay, the value of 4 plus 3 is, I'm going to do this just like we did any other output statement. And in just a second we'll make this a little better. Okay. Because obviously there wouldn't be a point in doing that if you knew it was going to be 4 and 3 every time. You would just say 7. But for the purposes of this, I wanted to show you that what I had been telling you was exactly what happened. So, what happened here is, it sent 4 and 3 down to this other function. It added them together and assigned it to total. Then it returned total to here. So this whole part here was basically replaced by the number 7. So it said temp equals 7, basically. And then it outputted 7. Now, let's change it up just a little bit. Let's do a couple of write line statements. Okay. Please enter the first number. I'm creating a programming no-no right here, because I did not go ahead and do my read line statements. Let's see. Let's create one called int A and B for now. Okay, A equals A equals convert to int32 console read line. B equals convert to int32 console read line. So now I need to simply change this A comma B. So I'm sending the values. So what's going to happen now is when the program gets here, it's going to ask me if I actually want to do something. When I say yes, it's going to ask me to enter the first number. Then it's going to ask me to enter the second number. And it's going to save them as A and B. Then when it calls the add numbers function, it's going to send A and B. Just as we discussed, the first thing sent, which is A, will be stored as num1 because it's the first thing here, and B will be stored as num2. Let me be clear, even if I had called these num1 and num2, it wouldn't matter. It only cares what order they're in. So I have 2 integers here and 2 integers here. If I would have done something different, like if the second one would have been a double instead of an integer, and I would have gotten them backwards, the computer would not have said, oh, he meant them the other way, and fixed it. It would have still tried to assign them in order, the first one to the first one, the second one to the second one, and it would have given me an error. So the only other thing I need to change is here. I need to change this so that it's the 0. This is a 1. And this is a 2. And then I can put A, B. So now it'll output the value of those. And it's telling me there were build errors. Why was it telling me that? Oh, it's telling me this because there's a chance that if this is false, it would simply come down here and try to run this command and output A and B, but I haven't assigned them any values. So it would work perfectly fine if it ran the if statement first and it had values for A and B. But if it skipped that, it wouldn't have had any values. So now I've told it to be 0, so now it should still work. Okay. That happens sometimes. Would you like to do something? Yes. Please enter the first number. Let's do 3. Enter the second number. Let's do 6. The value of 3 plus 6 is 9. Did exactly what we wanted it to do. That's perfect. Gotta love it when that happens. So what happened was simple. It came down, it asked us to enter the first number. We did, and it assigned it to A, which was 3. Then we asked it to do a second number. We did. We assigned it to B. Then we called the add numbers function and sent A and B. 3 and 6 came down here. 3 was assigned to num1 and 6 was assigned to num2. We created a variable called total. We said 3 plus 6, which was 9. We returned this, which in exchange replaced the call here with 9. And then it output the whole thing for us. So that's exactly what we wanted to happen. And let me tell you something else here. A couple other quick things about functions. I could have done anything in here. I didn't just have to add these together. I could have multiplied them. I could have divided them. I could have come up with all kinds of other stuff. I could have asked for 100 other numbers to be entered. Whatever I want to do, anything you can do in the main function, you can do in any other function. Another thing I could have done was I could have called the add numbers function. I could call it from here. I could call it from here. I could call it 100 different times in this program. I could have another function. I could call it from that function. I could send this function to another function. I could do whatever I want. Each function is completely independent, but as I said, it'll work its way back. So eventually this return total would return to here because that's where it was called from. But if this function called another function, that one would return here, and then this one would return to that one. So you can have as many functions as you want in a program. I've seen programs that had hundreds of functions in it. So it can be a little difficult to keep them all straight. That's why you need to give them such important names. You keep the function very simple, have it do a single task, and then give it a name that explains exactly what that task is going to do. And that way, it'll be a whole lot easier for you as you have more and more of them to deal with. So, anyway, that's it for functions, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And join us next time. We're going to talk about arrays. That's a lot of fun.